Hey guys, today I'm following up on my most recent video about the rod bearings job we did on my V10 E60 M5. Here's the story on my E46 M3 with the high-revving straight 6. Before I start, I figure I should call out here that I'm not a mechanic, nor do I pretend to be one. I've been obsessed with these cars since they came out, and I learned everything I can about them as an enthusiast. While indeed they are expensive to maintain, by having to maintain them, it's allowed me to learn about how they work. To keep them roadworthy, certain parts have to be replaced piece by piece over time. I've had this car for a little over 9 years now, and I've replaced quite a few parts, but nothing close to the volume of parts I've had to replace on my 4-year younger M5. But that's another story. For today, we're talking about rod bearings. While I'm not certain that the V10 would have destroyed itself in my M5, or that the straight 6 in my M3 would have done the same, the evidence from other owners was overwhelming. That the rod bearings on these engines, if not done already, need to be replaced urgently. And while I don't see as much concern online about the M3's rod bearings as I do on the M5's, I saw enough to convince me that these engines are ticking time bombs until the issue is addressed. While it's painful to spend thousands of dollars to fix an issue I can't see, hear, or feel, I didn't want to take any chances. Still, it's just a check on a long checklist for these cars. For the M3, next is to dig in and check the rear subframe. We'll likely need to bolster it. It'll be a pain. And the SMG is doing great, though Vanos may need some attending to. All in all, though, it's been a relatively trouble-free car to own 9 years in, and I'll make a video where I detail all of that soon. So then, again, what are rod bearings? I spoke about this briefly in the last video I made about the same job we did on my M5. Rod bearings are rotating metal sleeves that protect and lubricate your engine's crankshaft during the internal combustion cycle. Without them, your engine will destroy itself. The rod bearings of certain BMW engines have a tendency to wear prematurely, and it's a bit controversial. Part of the reason for this is the thick synthetic oil that BMW recommends, 10W60, which protects your engine well on high temperature track days, but is too thick on cold moorings to do much good until the engine is warm. And that can take a while. I suppose I've gotten into the groove of doing one major preventative maintenance job per car per summer. Having done the rod bearings job, among others, on the M5 last year, I did my homework and determined that the same job was the most urgent issue for me to deal with on the M3. So I made an appointment, shared what information I could that'd be useful, and then I took it in to JC Auto in Scarsdale, New York, about 15 miles north of Manhattan. And they've maintained this car for me going on 7 years now. The guys at JC Auto were kind enough to photograph their work, which I find fascinating to look at. Getting to look at the heart of what makes these powerful machines tick never ceases to amaze me. And just really quickly, I'll review a few of the items on the invoice, as it does nicely break down the steps involved. Okay, obviously you drain the engine oil, disconnect and remove the necessary components to access the oil pan, the oil pump, remove and install all new rod bearings, and there were 6 lower bearings, 6 upper bearings, $287 for the lower, $287 for the upper. Install a new oil pump, which was just over $1,000. Disconnect and remove the necessary components to access the valve cover. Found that the belts were dry and cracked. The pulley was making noise, the cabin filter was dirty, the spark plugs were fouled, and the upper radiator hose was swollen. They disconnected to remove the valve cover, measured and made all necessary adjustments to the valves using new shims, which is a big one. Then they reinstalled all the necessary components, replaced the upper radiator hose, the cabin filter, the spark plugs, the idler pulley and belts, as well as the engine mounts, the radiator hose, and so on and so forth. They refilled all fluids to factory specifications, reset the computer memory, cleared out any trouble codes, took it for a test drive. All's good. The reality is, these are expensive cars to maintain. They're cheap to buy for this reason. Well, they were. It seems that their values are increasing, and they're fun to drive and gorgeous to look at. While I'm tempted to compare repair costs to the M5's job last year, a comparison some of you may find useful, their repair bills weren't quite apples and oranges, as there were other tasks involved with both jobs, as certain difficult to reach parts like the M5's power steering or both cars' engine mounts were due to be replaced and were. As a general rule though, from my combined 15 years of experience owning both cars, maintenance on the M3 is generally half to 2/3 what it costs on the M5. I'd budget $5,000 every year for maintenance on each, and then be pleasantly surprised when there's plenty left over for the M3. That is, unless you daily drive them, and the cost will go up for sure. While that's a painful thought, consider that you're no longer paying depreciation on these cars. While maintenance isn't an issue when they're new, they lose half their value in the first few years. On the other hand, I bought my M3 9 years ago, and it very well may be worth more than what I paid for it in a few years. Considering that it's holding its value and the joy it brings me, I don't mind dealing with these issues. Though there is a funky vibration noise that it makes at about 1900 RPM that hasn't been easy to diagnose, though I assume it's Vanos related. And though visually inspected, I'm not convinced I have no rear subframe issues. And the SMG is going strong, but could go any day. It's a 16-year-old car, but still, 16 years on this transmission with no issues? Not bad. And truly, the car is as sprightly as ever. It's just a blast to drive. Alright, so that's it for today. For my next video about the M3, I'll do a 9-year ownership review.